Okay, so it's a beautiful Saturday in London, and my guest today is Moritz. Moritz, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, I guess.
Cool. So you are, wow, we met, well, like 2, 3 years ago, soon after I moved over here to London. And I think I just messaged you on LinkedIn, did I? As I do
Yeah,
sometimes.
I think it was because we
And
had the same journey. Product
yes,
manager, became founders, even worked in the same
exactly.
industry before, like travel industry. It was quite interesting. Our
Exactly.
profiles had like 100% overlap professionally.
Exactly. So I know you told me back then you were like, yeah, I usually don't respond to like weirdos who reach out, but you seems different, so I actually responded, and we kind of stayed in touch since then, and we hang out from time to time or talk from time to time. Um, you are now an e-commerce founder. You guys raised, is it just now you raised the second round of funding, right?
Just 2 weeks ago, we finalized
2 weeks ago.
everything. Series A now.
Congratulations. So we're
Thank
gonna
you very
talk a
much.
little bit more about that.
Sure.
Um, I think you run an interesting business. It's a little bit different from a typical e-commerce business, so I'd love to talk about that as well, how you got it to that idea. But before we get to that, I got this crazy new idea today, which I just told you about. That we're gonna start every episode with a little icebreaker, which is you tell me two truths and one lie about your life or your business, and then I'm going to try to guess which one is a lie. And then at the end of the episode, hopefully we don't forget to actually reveal the truth. Which one of those three things was the lie.
Great.
So what are your two truths and one lie?
Was really tough actually. So the lie had to be adjusted to the truth to fit in really nicely. Um, right, the first one, a few years back, accidentally we switched billing and delivery address for all our stock, and two vans full of stock arrived at my apartment. That's the
Okay.
first one. The second one is also a few years back, I was sitting on an airplane and I just wanted to stand up to pee, and the guy next to me had a heart attack. So I couldn't leave my seat for hours because,
Okay.
well, you're not asking the guy who has a heart attack on an intercontinental flight to stand up. So I had to go to the restroom so much. And the third one, I once hired someone who ended up stealing a little bit over 30,000 worth of goods from the company via test orders, all to his apartment.
Wow. Okay. So all those three sounds like interesting stories. I'm gonna say the heart attack was a lie, but let's
I will
see.
tell you at the end.
All three could be real. Cool. Well, at the end, we're gonna come back to this.
Sure.
Awesome. Okay, now we broke the ice. Now let's dive into your business. So, you started, or one of your, before you started your business, you were working for Eve Mattress or Eve Sleep, I think they're called, right? Which is a mattress company that was like crazy popular, well, like 5, 6, 7 years ago. The mattress companies, mattress online companies or e-commerce companies started popping up all over the world, and it was super cool to buy a mattress online. It was like really convenient, and they were way better than all the other mattresses. And you actually worked for one of those companies, right?
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, what you told me, you were like, this is probably not going to work. I need to leave, and I can probably do e-commerce better than they're doing. Was that roughly the story? Do I remember correctly?
Not that I can necessarily do e-commerce better. I think the product or the category had a major flaw, which is it already exists. Mattresses, you could buy them online. They even were delivered in a box. They just rebranded in a nice experience.
Yeah.
Plus, it's incredibly easy to start on. I literally can go to a factory up in Manchester, get a mattress in a box, rebrand it within a week, maybe 2, 3 weeks, and you have a new brand. And that's exactly what happened. It just got super crowded, and CPCs, I believe, at some point was like the word mattress was like 10 to 15 pound per click.
Uh,
A single on Google, a single click. You have to think. So it just became unsustainable. Concepts still great, great people. Just I think the niche got a bit overly populated.
uh, And then, okay, we don't need to go too much into mattresses and all this stuff. To focus more on your on your on your actual business. What, how? Tell us first. What are you doing now? What does your business do?
So at the moment, I founded with someone I met at Eve, Harvey, a company called Noah. And at Noah, we sell starter kits. We started with a student starter kit. So when you move to university here in the UK, you often go to a campus or you move cities. Not common in Germany, actually, but in the UK. So people move to a new campus, let's say Cambridge or a new city, and they normally go into an empty flat, an empty dorm room. Um, so we deliver a kit directly to their university dorm and kit out the entire dorm or room with bedding, kitchenware, cookware, towels. So one box, one order, everything sorted. That was the first box essentially, or starter kit we launched, and then we have expanded in a few others. We have a kitchen kit, we have a baking one. Recently, we launched a pottery kit, which is selling really well. And now we kind of, the next step is to expand into more and more starter kits just with this Series A essentially. We just hired a whole buying team and operations team in the last couple of weeks. So to accelerate that growth into more and more starter kits. So it's essentially what we want to do is make starting something new easier. So we call it like first steps covered. So when you move to university, it's a huge jump, right? Normally into something really unknown. So what we want to focus on essentially is making this jump into the unknown a bit easier by giving you all the products, but also holding your hand a little bit throughout the experience. So after you buy with us and we delivered the product, we send you lots of emails with lots of content. We call it Beyond the Box, which is kind of our content hub. And there we tell you from the simple things like how to do your first laundry to how to do grocery shopping, budgeting, or whatever. And that looks really different based on the kit. If you buy a pottery kit, we tell you the different techniques, how to make a vase, how to decorate different items, like how to paint them, or carve a pattern in there. Based on the box, it always looks completely different what we content-wise provide you. So we not just give you the product and let you go, but we try to give you a bit more, we say, beyond the purchase, essentially, beyond the product. And that's really what we're focusing on at the moment, those two things, product expansion and then content expansion to build a little bit of a relationship with the customer, essentially.
That's really cool. I actually didn't know that second part of the business. And how, so this is why I said that you're doing e-commerce. It's a little bit different because I think most of the e-commerce stores, they sell individual products. Not everyone, but I think that's the most kind of standard way. And you said, well, why don't we just package these things together and just give you everything you need, so you don't really need to think about every individual item, and you're going to get everything with kind of faster and cheaper, I believe, as well, because you don't really need to buy everything individual. Where's the idea coming from? How did you come up with that?
To not hate too much on the mattress industry, but essentially, the
But
mattress industry, but if you look at it, the mattress cost, they sell that for 600. It costs like 100, 150 to produce. So quite good unit economics from the get-go. Delivery is decent based on the average order value. However, what is really killing them is the marketing, right? So essentially, they don't provide added value. They just have really inflated prices across the mattress industry. Every old school, the new ones, everyone have inflated prices because they have to spend so much on marketing to get the customer in. Because obviously they also just sell every 10 years to a customer, roughly, right? You don't buy a mattress every other day. They might have other products and like expand into bed linen or pillows, but generally speaking, you buy once from them and then they bombard you with newsletters about sleep for 5 years until you're like, well, now I unsubscribe, and then they have to retarget you again on performance marketing. So it's just a very expensive kind of like area. And so I went away with Harvey and we kind of thought, essentially, how can we find a niche that provides value for the customer? So where we don't have this inflated price and we spend everything on marketing, and something that is new. So essentially, we said, well, if we want to have something that can grow, we need to find at least one niche that is underserved, and we don't have hyper expensive marketing, hyper expensive marketing. And then essentially, what we thought is, wait, what is if we not just have one product niche, but we find a concept that can go over multiple niches, right? So our pottery kit has actually nothing to do with the student kit, right? So I thought
Mm.
it would be quite interesting to find a brand, a direct to consumer brand, which is product agnostic, meaning not working in just the homeware or the sleep category. Um, and that was
Mm.
kind of where it started. I remember then when I moved to London, I normally don't say that because it makes me look really bad. But when I moved to London, uh, the first half a year I lived on takeaway. I had the worst salary you can imagine coming to London. Um, I didn't understand how expensive London is. So I was like, well, that salary sounds all right. It wasn't. So I came to London and lived on takeaways just because I didn't have cutlery, no crockery, I had nothing. I moved into an empty
Ah.
flat and I had nothing, nada. That changed then when I got a girlfriend, so I had to buy some stuff. But I kind of looked back on that experience and I was like, well, there is something where people are either too busy, too lazy, or it's too expensive. And if you can't find something that enables that or serves this category across multiple products, then we have kind of a winner. And we started with students at the time. We looked at starter kits. CPCs are really low for general terms around this, bundling starter kits. I think at the time the only one bidding on it on the term starter kit really was Jewel, like the vaping company. They are now forbidden.
Uh-huh.
They're not allowed to do it anymore. But they really tried to get people to start smoking or vaping. That was quite interesting. I thought that was the only competitor, which has nothing to do with our product, right? So
Yeah,
I really
exactly. Yeah.
thought we have something that works there, which has a high area to entry because it's lots of different products, which is generally hard to source from different materials and everything. And then we kind of just started in a storage unit in Islington and have grown from there essentially.
Got it. And what did I want to say? I think you were profitable early on, right? Pretty much almost from the beginning.
Yeah, we bootstrapped.
Yeah.
So from the first moment, Eve Sleep had an IPO, so they really pushed quite hard on this. So made a little bit of cash, which was one then invested in this business. So we had a little bit of some startup capital by ourselves. Wasn't much, like nothing to really talk about, but it kind of allowed us to get a website on, to
Hmm.
buy stock, have some storage sorted, like really kind of get the first couple of months sorted. Um, yeah, and then since then we have been profitable on a unit economics basis. Not anymore at the moment. Expanding into lots of regions and products and having a whole team is a bit more expensive. But generally speaking, yes, just until our first investment, we have been 100% profitable.
Nice. And so you raised your first round, what was that, like a year ago? Or is it more already?
Yeah, that
Might be
was
more.
January last year, so a little bit over a year.
Okay. Okay. So that was your seed round, and now you just closed your Series A.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, why did you decide to go raise funding? So some people would say like, well, you were profitable. Do you really need to raise? There's a big debate, right? Should you raise or should you not raise? There are businesses that should, there are businesses that shouldn't. So I'm just curious, what was your view on that actually?
I think e-commerce is a tough one. So we looked at initially because we were profitable, thinking we could get a loan from a bank. But because I'm an
Yeah,
expat and I have never used a credit card here, so I now have a credit card because literally the banks told me we don't know who you are from a credit score. I don't have family here, nothing. So banks, even though we were profitable, didn't want to give us anything, even the conversation. Um, because I
interesting.
was the sole director at the time. Since now we have two more British directors, which makes it a bit easier to go through those credit checks, but at the time that was difficult. So we then looked at revenue-based
Yeah,
financing. So we worked with a few companies such as Uncapped, for
that's pretty
example.
popular now these days.
It works really well, but it also directly drains your war chest as soon as you get it. So, which doesn't really work for us because we had one of the problems, we wanted to build up a supply chain. So we're selling essentials, and essentials are much cheaper, and you have much more control if you go directly to the manufacturer, wherever they sit in Europe or in Asia, than through importers. And we needed more capital, and the capital is going to be bind up 5 6 months essentially, because you have to pay deposits, then you have to, it's on the water. So from placing an order to getting the actual product, it might take 5 6 months essentially. That means lots of the revenue ones didn't really work. They're more set to finance your existing supply chain, like your incoming goods, and you just kind of place your next order. But we also had this time to try to build a completely new supply chain, which we now have done in one of the most difficult years to build a supply chain, I reckon, in the most recent history. But we're just getting now June, so essentially 1.5 years after we raised our seed round, the completely new student kit and kitchen kit, much higher quality, amazing value for money for the customer, and we have a hold on the supply chain. But with something like Uncapped or those, they're brilliant. They really helped us out really early on. But it's much harder to make those big leaps, essentially, where your capital is going to be held up for half a year or longer, and you need security that that capital is available, and not revenue-based financing. They don't make it based on your forecast, right? They make it on your current run rate. So you maybe get 100,000, 200,000 based on your revenue, but anything far beyond that becomes more and more difficult, essentially.
Uh-huh. Okay, I see. And so are you planning to, mostly people who raise VC funding, very often you look to build a very large company, right? Usually VCs, they want, 100x kind of returns. Is that your goal? Is that the direction that you're going, or something different?
I guess it always depends who is asking. Generally speaking, yes. I think 100x return is going to be difficult because we have quite high revenue, so the valuation is already a bit up there from the last round. So 100x means one of the most valuable e-commerce companies ever built. However, looking at what the first round, there I think that's actually possible. We are product agnostic, so I compare us a little bit in some conversations with those Amazon aggregators. So right, Berlin Brands, Razor Group, Thrasio, or however you pronounce them in the US, those
Yeah.
aggregators who buy brands on Amazon and then kind of manage them. I think there is a similarity, which is product agnostic, so you don't have to just focus on one niche.
Meaning
But
that the
the
market can
benefit,
be really big, right?
exactly, but the benefit then on top of that is that we have a concept and a brand to hold it all together. So, right, all our starter kits or all our products somehow have a connection, even though one is pottery and one is a student kit. We have a concept that holds everything together under one umbrella and helping us essentially to expand into new product ranges. And some of them are actually massive. If you look in the UK alone, students moving to university, spending roughly every year, just moving the first year to university, 240 million on homeware. Not on MacBooks, that's actually the same amount again. Just on homeware is 240 million. And that's obviously a crazy number if you look at that is your niche product, right? So obviously there are bigger markets when you go to the US, where you have 10 times that market of homeware spend, for example, and Europe. So, but every product has their niche. Maybe not every product is a 100 million, has a potential to by itself do 100 million in revenue. But there are multiple products where we believe we can tenth of millions in revenue, and we're getting closer to that with products we have. So meaning with that in mind, and you build enough of those successful starter kits, you can build something that is driving over 100, 200, 300 million in revenue. It's just having a concept that all binds it together, essentially.
What's your revenue now?
We are currently at 3 million for this financial year, which closes in May. So we're getting quite close to that number. We currently we have some seasonality in the business, right? So lots of the baking and pottery is more Christmas, like in the darker months. Students, obviously, it's August, September. So it fluctuates, whatever you look at, like which months you look at. So, but we're launching more and more kits now in the next coming months. And we just expanded actually this week to Europe via Amazon, actually, as like kind of a stepping stone into the continent. But that really should accelerate this. But we are a bit over 3 million for this financial year we're aiming to.
Okay. And then how much did you raise?
So the first raise was 1.4 million. So that was our seed round. And in this current raise, we aim to do 5. So the majority of that raise already happened due to working with EIS funds who need to kind of, on the financial year, which ended 2 weeks ago, have a cut. So we have split our Series A into 2 tranches, essentially, one for last financial year and one for this financial year. But we're waiting essentially for the new products to come in and see how that all develops. So we have raised the majority of the 5 million, but still looking for more strategic partners potentially. So now as we go in Europe and the US, finding partners that maybe are not as established in the UK, but in those regions, potentially investors, essentially.
Interesting. Okay. And so mostly what you want to invest in is just expansion. So you said new starter kits and then geographical expansion as well. Is that right?
Yeah, there's this holy trinity, which we currently want to tackle. One is product expansion, geographic expansion, and then team expansion. So we are currently 12 really brilliant people working across marketing, operations, brand, everything you can imagine. But as it's 12 people, in most cases, it's kind of a one-man show in each department. So now building this out into 25 people is the next step we want to take. So currently looking for, I think, 8 different roles. Sorry. So we kind of, want to make sure that we have the room for strategic planning while we also grow the team, essentially. That's a very interesting step because it goes a little bit beyond that someone does everything to kind of more specializing in each area. So before we have done one person doing all marketing channels, now we hire someone for Amazon and then AdWords and Facebook. So for each individual channel to focus a bit more and specialize in each channel. Same for other areas such as finance or operations. So we split operations now into warehouse and logistics. If you go global, all of a sudden it becomes a lot if one person does it all. So we now hire someone who deals with warehouses and someone who deals with goods between warehouses.
There's this rule of thumb, but I don't know if you've heard of that I think as your team increases, every time when your team increases by a factor of 3 or a factor of 10, then you need to completely reinvent how the company is organized and how you run things and like the tools that you use and like a lot of the internal structure, because it's like when you're alone and then when you're alone, it's completely different than when you have 3 people. And then when you have 10 people, it's completely different again. And then when you have 30 people, it's completely different again. When you have 100, it's just the way how everything's organized and how you manage things and so on.
Yeah, it's really interesting because my background is tech. So when we just started, I thought, well, let's run it like a tech company with Scrum and sprints. And that worked really well when we were 4 or 5 people. So before our first investment, where we then hired 7 people that all started on the same day. And we were like, right, let's run it like we did before. I think that kind of really quickly became quite difficult because nobody's used to run like a tech company in marketing or operations. So like having daily stand-ups, have reviews and all those things. So we reworked this rather quickly into something where we still have some element of that. So we still check in because everything was remote. So you still need the more regular check-ins. But it became quite difficult, especially while being completely remote, to find the best kind of project way of project management. I think it took us like 2-3 weeks to then find our rhythm with everyone all of a sudden in the company. And now we're doing this again. We splitting the departments up more and more. And all of a sudden we're working on Asana at the moment as a project management tool, which works really, really nicely. but it becomes so many boards that for me, having the overview, it becomes more and more difficult. So actually, I'm spending a lot in Asana, but I can't expect everybody else to do that as well. So what we
Mm-hmm.
now moved to is we actually moving, we had like a knowledge base built into Google Sites or Google Pages, or Google,
Mm-hmm.
not sure what it's called, Sites or Pages. But we're now moving to Notion actually, just to have like all
Mm-hmm.
the knowledge really in one place and then connected with Asana. So when you work on one specific subject, you directly know which boards and which tasks are associated to this wider subject. For example, we had a warehouse move going on. We moved to a completely new warehouse, which is massive, which our old warehouse fits into half an aisle from the new warehouse, essentially. It's just incomprehensibly large. But that was a massive project. So we saw that information kind of sits in lots of different places, makes it hard. So now moving to Notion, as we get more specialists, is a must because there's just so much knowledge going on for every stakeholder, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see. Um, Okay, so speaking of that, that brings me to another interesting subject. So you said, well, you start things in one way and then you kind of completely reorganize them because you realize it's not really working anymore. What were some of the biggest challenges that you had in the last, let's say, in the last year or even longer period? Some of the most difficult things that you had to overcome.
Uh, that's actually where my co-founder should be, Harvey. He would start laughing and say, "Well, obviously supply chain.
Yeah.
I think supply chain and building a completely new product, doing a supply chain crisis. Just so in case someone doesn't know, during COVID, supply went down massively or demand went down massively initially, and then all of the sudden, when in the winter in 2020 now, everything opened up essentially. Demand has risen. And since then, places like China, Turkey, or other kind of places known for manufacturing, like India, they're playing catch up. So I think there's one number which is really interesting that kind of demonstrates what's happening. A container from China to the UK cost pre-pandemic anything between 1,500 and $2,000 to ship it over. Now, or during the height of the pandemic, it cost between 15,000 and 20,000, so 10 times.
Which is
That
insane,
essentially
right?
means everything you ship, if it's not really small items, so it has no impact on the iPhone really, I guess to an extent, because the iPhone is small, right? Lots of value in a really, so if you look at this small thing, it's like lots of value in a very small product, right? But if
Mm.
you look at something like a fridge, we were talking to suppliers and they were like, well, in a container, they're fitting like 40, 50 fridges. They were like, well, that
Mm.
means every fridge to deliver it over here costs like anything between 400, 500 pounds just to deliver it to the UK. They were like, well, that just doesn't work. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, every company kind of has found their way through it. But for us, building something completely new has been incredibly challenging during those times because we wanted to build completely new supply chain, and every product we have obviously needs a different supply chain. Our lovely frying pan supplier can't help us with clay for pottery, right? And then there are random things that happen. The war in the Ukraine obviously has impact on everyone, but for example, Ukraine is, besides being one of the largest providers of like what is it, wheat, I think,
Mm-hmm.
or like food in general in the world. They're also one of the largest clay providers in the world, having an impact on
Uh-huh.
a new kit we just brought out. So those
Uh-huh.
random things happening around the globe impacting us, and we don't have any control over this. And I think the hard bit there is not actually finding a solution because often there's a solution. You can throw money at it, you can just wait a little bit, you can find a different supplier. But I think the the biggest thing is that you have no impact on that. You have a team of incredible talented people sitting in an office, and we're like, well, there's nothing we can do. Like it's just not us impacting that, which might be sometimes different in a tech company, right? So it's like the tech company builds a product and they are in full control.
Mm-hmm.
Where in e-commerce, I realized I think the hardest challenge is learning you're not fully in control. Um, which is obviously sad sometimes that you can't move as fast as you want. But it's also, it opens your eyes a little bit to how to overcome those challenges, how to work as a team, and how to slow down first to then speed up to, I think in startups where I worked before, it's always about going 120 miles an hour essentially as a team, and you just don't build a foundation that you actually can build a business on. So I think we are quite conscious of building this foundation essentially. And I think the challenge, like the challenges we face this year, essentially got us to a point where we built a through and through solid business essentially, rather than
Hmm.
something that is just trimmed on revenue and artificial revenue numbers just so investors are happy. Something that has
Hmm.
much more substance to it essentially.
Got it. It's interesting. So you made a comparison with tech businesses a few times now, and you coming from tech, do you think that I think it can certainly be an advantage sometimes because they're, just in terms of understanding technology and maybe solving some problems with technology. Do you think that that
Yeah,
affects also how you're building Noah?
I think so. So after I left Eve Sleep, like the mattress company, I was like, well, I want to do tech. I don't want to do e-commerce again because I just hate those restrictions around you. You can't just build
Yeah,
something and everybody loves it. You need to wait
yeah,
for products to arrive, for packaging. There's so many elements. And I think what I kind of
yes, yeah.
learned is tech companies are very focused on sometimes one feature, which is really good, which allows them to scale really fast in many cases. But in e-commerce, for example, product management looks completely different. It's much more project management because there's so many parts to it, right? If we launch a new product, we don't have just one product manager, a developer, and a designer working on this, right? So if we launch a new product, we have to do market research. So marketing comes in before what is the price point, what is the demand,
Mm,
what do we think the CPC is going to be? Is it going to be profitable at this price point and with those margins? Then we have operations just to get packaging sorted. Then we have designers to design the packaging and the products. Then we have buyers. So it's like you have many more people or multitude of people and teams involved to get anything done in e-commerce. And I reckon where then kind of my project management or product management experience comes in is reeling this all in, essentially, making sure everybody works towards the same milestones, the same goal. So this kind of one feature approach where you often have in product management, this is what we want to get done, an MVP. And
hmm.
often, like, for example, we have people in the buying department working for large companies before, like John Lewis. They are incredibly surprised that we can launch products within a month because they're like, well, but the
Hmm.
packaging takes 6 weeks to arrive. So how can we launch a product in a month? And we're like, well, we can do it this and this and this way. And then all of a sudden they're like, wait, what? We have packaging that takes 6 weeks. We still launch the product in a month by just
Hmm.
kind of hacking your way through this systems that are in place essentially. I think it helps. It's quite different. Um, it makes you conscious that not everything is about just a polished website. It's very much about the essence of the product,
Yeah.
which I think in tech sometimes people forget that the product actually has to help and have a good value rather than just be sparkly, essentially.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I've seen a few examples now of physical product founders who I had somebody on the podcast actually recently. They are selling and also designing their own gym equipment. And man,
Ah,
I'm not going to remember the number, but they launch well several new products per month. And I don't remember what's the number, but it was like I wish I would remember, but I don't want to. I don't want to say a completely wrong number, but it was several new products every single month, which sounded crazy. I was like, man, there are a lot of tech companies that don't manage to do that, and they manage to do it with physical products, designing something from beginning to the end, and then manufacturing it and launching it. And they just really perfected that process. And one thing that he said that was critical for them to be able to do that is they just prepare their own process and a checklist of things, every single thing that needs to happen for every single new product. And now a just streamlined process of things that need to happen, including the timeline for every single thing, how long everything should take. And it's just like a machine that keeps going, and they just keep, all they need are ideas. But one of his co-founders is really good with just bringing new ideas for what else should be launched, and they have like an enormous backlog of potential products, and they just keep going.
Yeah, that's where we want to get to. So I reckon we do something similar. We have like it's essentially just an Asana board where we have all the standard tickets, and then it's a template essentially, and we just duplicate that. As soon as we want to launch a new product, we just say, well, let's do this, and then we duplicate the whole board, adjust the dates and the timeline, and then we have all the tickets we normally need, and then we just do a bit of pruning if anything doesn't apply or if anything needs to be added. But it just the biggest scope essentially. Do we need like approval from certain authorities for this product, or like testing, and all those kind of like really specific things to each product. If it doesn't apply to the new product, we just delete those tickets. But it always leaves us with like the biggest scope blueprint essentially, and then we kind of cut it down. Has been a bit hard to actually utilize it during a global pandemic, but we just now have actually set up our whole infrastructure in Asia. So we have like a warehouse in Shenzhen, where now because we have so many different items that need to be collated in a kit. So with that new warehouse, which literally just does the first product run, I think in 2 weeks, essentially, end of April, where it comes from dozens of different places, all the products all over China, get delivered to Shenzhen, and then the warehouse just assembles the boxes essentially, making the process much easier. And then we want to go to something similar. Maybe not multiple products every month, but my goal would be every month we hammer out a new starter kit essentially, but essentially similar. You need a blueprint, you need a very fixed structure of how you do this. Ideation, I think, is the hardest part, because building a board for ideation or a process for ideation might be a bit harder of a new product. But generally speaking, if you have a list, which we have for loads of starter kits or lots of products, then having the blueprint seems to be the way to go.
Yeah. And then you just keep improving that, right? And you have a blueprint that you keep perfecting it probably with every product launch. You learn something new, you improve it a little bit. There's one thing that I forgot to ask you before. I know that when you were raising the first round, you had like a creative approach to that, which you talked about a little bit also in our community. Can you talk a little bit about that? Did you do anything similar for your next round as well? Or, I think you're quite good at finding creative, kind of different approaches to things. So that's just one example that I'm aware of.
I think I always say I'm very, very German. So I'm very data-driven, process-driven. I sometimes would say everything is kind of black and white for me. And I think our very first pitch deck really was,
I think that comes,
a reflection
sorry
of that.
for interrupting you. I think that comes also from coming from tech. I'm not German, but I come from tech, and for me also for a long time in life, everything was black and white, because that's how technology works. It's like it's either 0 or it's a 1. It's true or false. It works or it doesn't work. There's no in between.
Exactly. I think our first pitch deck was an essence of this. Like I think it was the essence of how Harvey, my co-founder, and I are as people. So it's really data driven. So it didn't have a nice design. We literally just tried to explain why this is a good idea and defend the idea in the pitch deck. We then got a designer, Chad, head of brand, brilliant guy. He came in and we talked about this a bit more. We kind of reworked Noah as a brand a little bit, and we actually got away on a getaway, and we had struggled to raise. We never even got a reply from investors really at the beginning. So we changed our approach. We were like, what do we do wrong with our with our pitch deck? And we came to the conclusion that it's storytelling. We're not selling an idea. We try to sell you data points why this is a good idea. And we at seed stage, that's not needed. So we don't have to convince that the 1 million revenue we made last year has really good margins, and the bottom line maybe has like 100K coming out of it. Investors, it's not really interesting on those interested in those things. They, as you said earlier, they want scale, right? So we changed storytelling massively, and we were, let's say, damaged a little bit by not having any responses last time we tried to raise earlier that same year. We also were quite unfortunate. The first time we raised, we had some conversations going on, but we raised in March. Wait, that's exactly when the pandemic started. So all the conversations were cut. We literally received dozens of emails saying, hey, interesting, can't jump on a call. We have to focus on our portfolio companies. And I was like, so it was a bad time to raise. We were a bit damaged by that, and we went ahead, told a much better story. I really love our pitch deck, the first one and the last one. But I think what you were kind of alluding to was, as we were a bit scared that we don't get replies, we thought we need to give it a twist so that investors who see the pitch deck share it with their network and share it with other investors. So one of the first slides actually had a fake starter kit explained in it, which was a VC starter kit. So it was an image of a normal guy not being a VC, and our starter kit helping this guy to become a VC, essentially. So it had the kit had like 0 to 1 in there, obviously a Tesla key, a Patagonia vest, Allbirds shoes, and a few other items. So essentially taking the piss out of investors. Like, it was a bit risky. We had a few investors coming back when I was on calls. They were like, well, I thought it's funny. My managing partner thinks it's not funny at all. So we got it burned a few times, but we also got so many calls from people where they were like, I've seen your pitch deck. Someone sent me XYZ, send it to me, because it was funny. It was a bit different. We took, a little bit the piss with the investors. And I think the feedback we had was that investors really loved it. I think investors also have changed a little bit over the last few years to get rid of this image of the Silicon Valley investor image here in Europe. So I think they transitioned a little bit away from
investors. Meme investors are a thing now, right? Meme investors.
Yeah, it actually exists, weirdly enough. But yeah, essentially, that got us the foot in the door. We got much better in storytelling. We peeled back a bit on the numbers. We still presented all the numbers that were important, but instead of trying to defend our business and the idea, we just draw the bigger picture. As you earlier said, can we do a 100x return on this? And that's what we kind of visualized in the pitch deck. The next one now didn't have a funny twist, but also just because our numbers were looking really, really healthy. And then essentially our investors were like, do you have a pitch deck? And we're like, because we mentioned to our investors that we want to raise, and they were like, we really think you should raise right now because we're growing month over month. And we wanted to take on some loans actually initially, after a few talks with our current investor base, and internally we were like, right, we can run much faster instead of taking a loan of a couple of 100,000. We just raise a few million. It sounds really, I understand how stupid it sounds. You say we just raise a few millions, but essentially we were on a run. We grew really, really quickly, like 3-4x year on year. So that just helps us now to accelerate that growth, go into other regions. We can expand into the US much faster. So over the summer, we're expanding to the US, given via Amazon first to build up volume, but then also with our own kind of brand and website. But it allows you to do much more. And in this particular case, it was a bit of an easier raise because we had a list of investors who were interested already. So I think seed investment is the hardest to raise. Afterwards, if you have a good product, a good brand, a good company, and a good team, I think the Series A is, in many cases, a bit more than a formality, or at least less effort than the seed round, essentially.
Fascinating, interesting. Yeah, so you took a bit of a meme approach to fundraising, which which worked. It's risky and it can feel unusual, but it's also, man, it's the world that we live in, right? I mean, look at Elon Musk. I mean, he's a meme account on Twitter. Like he just tweets out
Yeah.
memes, and it works. It works for him, and it works for him to promote Tesla through that and to build his personal brand or whatever.
Fun fact, the only
And
investors saying anything were Germans and kind of European. I think there was a Dutch investor, a German one.
really.
So all the kind of like Central European, like really, I mean, I'm German, as you can tell from my accent,
So
obviously.
you can
So
criticize Germans, yeah.
exactly, I can criticize them a little bit, but it was literally just them saying, "Oh, yeah,
Mm,
someone thought that was a bit weird." Or some people ask us straight up if it's a real starter kit we are aiming to launch, and I was like,
I even that.
"Obviously not. Are we a starter kit with a Tesla in there? Like, that's not happening."
But it's like, yeah, it works. And I think, if you don't offend anyone, then you're probably not doing anything particularly interesting. Or like whenever you do something a little bit innovative or a little bit more risky, certainly you're going to offend somebody by what you're doing. Do you know, that reminds me, do you know who's Turner Novak, this investor from the US?
Mm.
It's funny. So he is the best example of a meme investor, and he's literally just leveraging memes to invest in startups. And it's crazy because I think nobody else is doing that. Um, he's kind of big on Twitter. His VC firm is called Banana Capital. So it's just like,
I think I
that's
actually have
already
seen them before, actually. Now saying, yeah.
like that's funny already. And then he's the only things that he's tweeting, a lot of the VCs on Twitter, they're like these thought leaders and they talk about how to build a business and how to raise funding, etc., etc. He is just posting memes and he's just like making fun of everything and everyone. And on Twitter is like this funny community where every day you have one thing that everyone in tech is making fun of. I don't know, somebody goes viral and then everyone's like making fun of them or whatever. And he's really funny, and he always finds these funny twists on funny takes on anything that's interesting in tech that day. And yeah, he's just posting memes, and he's like, "Look, founders love to work with me because I'm funny and because I'm not like this stiff, boring investor, who's gonna be like difficult. I'm actually interesting and fun, and like founders like that." So,
I can imagine this. Like, admittedly, I'm not on Twitter. I'm also not big in the meme community. I was when I think 9gag, like when I was 16 or
uh-huh.
something. I still enjoy them, but I've seen our investor, our board member Schiff, also really relaxed guy, and the whole
Mm,
company Fuel is our main investor at the moment. They have a really relaxed approach, and that's actually why we went with them. We had multiple offers on seed round actually, so but it was the investor that was the most approachable. We decided to go with because it just seemed like genuine nice guys you would love working with, and not the guys in suits.
mm,
I'm not saying the other investors were just guys in suits, but they just had this very nice personal touch essentially when we talked to them, and that convinced us to go with them very early on.
I see. Okay. Um, okay, I want to change the subject a little bit. In
Sure.
terms of when you decided to switch from, uh, you know, being employed, like having a job, and then switching to actually being a founder, what motivated you to become a founder?
You mean
Gonna
really
do a
when I
little bit
came
of a
from?
gonna do a little bit of therapy session now. So,
Yeah.
childhood traumas, or what was it?
I think there are always like multiple parallels. So I loved when I was a kid. I loved strategy games. And actually had a conversation. So my mom used to say, I once walked into a conversation. She had some friends over, and I was back in Germany, staying at my parents' place. I walked into a conversation where, oh, what is Moritz doing? And my mom said, oh, he sells mattresses. I was like, man, that's not what I'm doing. Like, that's really not what this is about. And then I talked with her a little bit, and then she was telling me, um, so you playing all those strategy games on the computer years ago was not a waste of time. And I was like, here, I told you when I was a kid, it's all serves its purpose. So I think it was quite early on that I loved strategy games. I really, really loved them. Anything where you have to build something and it grows, and you just build something much bigger. Civilization, I played a lot as a kid, and all those really long haul strategy games. Um, I always enjoyed that. I always said I want to become a founder. It's funny enough, every founder has a story where they were a kid and something goes on. I have this, or I had this really small book when I was like 5 years. I couldn't even write. I had a book where I wrote down. I couldn't write. So my inventions, and my very first invention I ever wanted to do, and I was 5 years old, was a 4-slot toaster. So every morning we woke up. It took a long time for the whole family. We're a big family,
Yeah.
so making the toast, and I was like, when I'm an adult, I'm going to make a 4-slot toaster. So I'm going into elementary school first, like 6 years old roughly, and I make a friend. First week, we go to his house, and I'm like, "What the hell?" And there was a 4-slot toaster. I literally was devastated that there's a 4-slot toaster that exists. And I went home to my mom. I'm like, Mom, someone has a four. And she was like, what's heck going on? Why is that a problem for you? And I showed her my book, which I kept a secret because, well, I didn't want anyone to steal my idea. I was like,
Obviously, yeah.
she was like, well, yeah, that exists. We can buy one if you want. I was like, no, I wanted to build it. And all those things. And like every story, every founder has those odd stories, right? So I think there is something as a kid where you can tell. But it wasn't then that I joined between Eve Sleep and founding another company, Ecommerce as well. And it has been the most toxic place I've ever worked at, like even heard of in a long time. And I was like, well, I think I just, last day of my probation, I literally just walked out. I'm like, I can't deal with this. I was pulled into a meeting. There was some talks about replacing the CEO, like a coup or something. And I was like, well, I'm out of this. I don't want any of this. So I literally walked out and never heard of them again. I literally was like, well, here's a laptop. See you guys. It was a really odd experience because I quit literally on my last day of the probation period. So it have only been 3 months essentially. And I was like, well, what do you do now? And to avoid going into anything similar again, I was like, well, just found yourself something, build a lovely culture with nice, genuine, caring people around you rather than something that feels rather toxic. The people in the company, actually, the people were very lovely, like the company which has a toxic culture. It was just the management that made it really odd to work in. The people itself, I'm still in touch with many of them, actually. But I think I realized that only the management can actually make those changes or build a culture. Everybody is part of it and builds it slowly. I think at the moment, many people talk about culture of the individual and stuff like that, which is really interesting. But essentially, it comes down from the management to celebrate the culture and to build it intentionally. Yeah, and I kind of like always knew I want to found a business at some point, and I was like, perfect timing. I'm sick of founders or C management who don't care except the revenue number. So we were like, well, let's come up with an idea. The idea was the harder part than the decision to do something on my own. That was quite impulsive, but the idea took a couple of nights in the pub essentially.
I see. Nice. Okay. And so on the similar subject now, being a founder, one thing that I've talked quite a bit about on the podcast is performance as a founder, right? It's a difficult job. It can be a difficult job. Well, it usually is a difficult job. It can be stressful. It can mean, long hours. I always feel like you kind of need to be on top of shit all the time. Like what's happening, what people are doing, what are the next steps, how to make sure we're moving forward. So I'm wondering how do you look at it? How do you think about it? Like how do you make sure that you are on top of stuff?
I think at the start when we hired people in different positions, it was quite difficult. I felt like I'm micromanaging without wanting to micromanage, but I realized it's in areas I don't understand. So because someone telling me this and this is happening I had to look into the ticket to understand fully what's going on and ask questions. And it felt a little bit like a bit too much micromanagement because as I said, we tripled the size of our team overnight, essentially. So it took some time to actually realize, yeah, you have to trust the experts you hire. And I still pull like often all-nighters, but I generally enjoy it. Going back to playing strategy games, for me, I don't feel like it's work at all, at all. Never felt like it's a drag. For my girlfriend is obviously, she's still in the park. As I said earlier, we were in the park and she's like, oh, you don't want to stay in the park? I was like, well, I'm jumping on a podcast. And she was like, well, why? And I was like, it sounds interesting. Like, it sounds like something I would actually enjoy. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
about this in every area. It's like, for me, as long as there's growth and I see a development and I can see the next steps, the next milestones, I believe it's just incredibly exciting. So for me, I know and I've found out what my rhythm is. I'm a night
Mm,
owl, so I work normally the normal hours. I come late into the office. I'm like at 10 in the office normally. I need a long breakfast. I stay up at like 8:30 or something around this time, but I need an hour at home. I need really slow start, eat breakfast, maybe watch a stupid YouTube video or whatever, like really slow, and then go to work. 8 hours, that's it, cut, and then enjoy your evening, go out, have dinner, whatever. And then at 11, kind of, that's my
uh-huh.
hour to shine for 2 hours again. But that's the hour,
Yeah.
nobody's online, and I can just keep going. That was really hard at the beginning because I realized Slack doesn't have a feature to schedule notifications. And people
Yeah.
felt like, even if I tell them, don't respond to those messages, they responded at midnight to
Mm,
messages. And I tried to work
mhm.
around, which is really hard. So lots moved to email, where you had the Gmail, the scheduling feature.
Yeah.
But for me,
Yeah.
those two scheduling features, they make like, I think it can be sometimes a bit confusing for people. 9 a.m. next morning, then five different channels, there are like messages popping up here and there.
Yeah.
But I actually think it helps the team to not feel like the pressure for me to answer in the moment because I don't expect
Mm.
anyone else to work that time. That's my flow. Harvey, my co-founder, he's a weird guy. He wakes up at 6 and starts working. I could never ever do that. He likes to joke that we could do 24/7 customer support because there were times when I went to bed at like 4 or 5 in the morning and he wakes up
Yeah.
at 5 and we had some overlap in the very,
Yeah.
very early days. So we had 24/7 customer service essentially. But I don't expect anyone to do that. And I think as long as I enjoy it, I wouldn't change any of that. Um, I think I'm quite good. I don't have notifications on my phone. All notifications, everything is turned off completely. Even
Really?
calls. I don't get any notification if someone calls me uh, because I don't like on laptop the same. I don't have notifications. It's a distraction, so I can decide actively when I want to do something. I'm checking now emails. I now do this. I now check Asana or sales. Everything is off, and I think that was a big change for me to then be much more conscious of right now. I'm working. Right now I'm relaxing. Right now I'm doing
Hmm.
this. So like kind of partition your day a little bit essentially.
Do you schedule your day in a specific kind of way, specific flow, other than your night shift when you just like kind of work on things focused?
Generally no, because but just I hate meetings, but I'm on way too many at the moment. We're hiring for so many roles, so my day
Hmm.
is scattered with meetings because I obviously will adjust to whoever we interview to their schedule. So it makes it quite hard to actually set time aside. But generally, if it's not that busy with hiring, I try to do that. I try to have calls in the morning, then like a bucket, like or like 2 hour break where I can just focus, and then the afternoon again. Because yeah, I need that. I also when I'm working from home, I often take like half an hour, an actual break where I sit in front of the TV and watch something. I don't know, Rick and Morty, something completely brainless where I can just relax
Hmm.
because I realize I need those, yeah, pockets of time essentially for myself.
Hmm. Nice. Love, you actually inspired me to try the no notification thing as well. I considered that, and I disabled notifications for most of the stuff, like definitely no things like Facebook or Instagram or any of that. But emails, yes. WhatsApp, yes. And I feel the need to actually reply to those really quickly. But it is a distraction, right? And when you're in the middle of something and then you get an email, and you're like, well, now I need to reply to this, and then just it
The
takes
new
your focus away.
the new iOS feature, like I think come out like 4 or 5 months ago, you can actually set different schedules for your notifications. I have
Aha.
currently, so it's like, so I said, do not disturb sleep, personal, and work, and schedule them. So, for example, during the workday, actually, like between my workday starts at 10, but between 10 and 6, I actually have notifications for some stuff, like Gmail, or
Aha.
WhatsApp,
Hmm.
but they don't make a sound or anything, or my screen doesn't light up.
Aha.
So they still on the screen
Ah.
if I actively pick up the phone, but only during the workday,
Yeah.
because I feel sometimes a Slack message or something if I'm in a meeting still has some importance. Um,
Yeah.
but after the workday, it's all off, just because I don't have to deal with this. And you can schedule it now. So I split. I'm also like in this rhythm. Every 6 months, I deinstall all social media and then I install it again.
Hmm.
This
Yeah.
rhythm keeps happening for me. But generally speaking, I just try to not spend time on a phone much, because I think a little bit waste of time in general.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I do the same. Well, now I uninstalled everything except Twitter from my phone. I do like Twitter, but I have a timer. You can limit the amount of minutes or hours that you
Mm,
spend on a certain app on iPhone. So I set that for Twitter just to not overspend. But I've met a lot of interesting people through Twitter. I've learned stuff
yeah,
through Twitter. It's my only source of news. So that's my only app. This is my version of your Rick and Morty, right? When I when I want to just do something, where I don't need to think about, I open Twitter, scroll through that, and that's my version of it.
yeah. I kept
But yeah,
LinkedIn.
otherwise,
I kept LinkedIn
sorry.
because I kept
Aha.
LinkedIn, but only
Mm-hmm.
because I have the similar feeling. It's like
Yeah.
a source of like what's going on in the world, essentially.
Aha.
Because I had to really get used to not getting my news from Facebook or Instagram. So not LinkedIn is my news source. I'm using like Apple News, I think it is,
Aha. Mm-hmm.
or like uh, The Economist, for example, to move more in depth. But I really had this vacuum at the start when I deinstalled everything or pushed off notification. It's like, what do you do with those pocket of time when you have my 5 minutes if you don't have Instagram or any social media? And it's really easy to then install it again. So I had to find something that still keeps me entertained enough, and that was just focusing on news essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Would you say that you're otherwise quite disciplined? Otherwise, in general, in life.
I would I would think so. I wouldn't. What would be an example to not be disciplined? I'm not entirely sure if I follow. Generally, in work-wise, I am. If it comes to my private life, I think I'm just a quite tidy person. Me and my girlfriend, we are quite similar. She's actually Argentinian, I'm German. So you would think
Uh-huh.
there are different cultures clashing, but I came a bit closer to the Argentinian way. She came a bit closer to the German way. So we got in a really good mix, generally speaking. I would say that actually gets to the nice middle ground where you're like, well, yeah, how we live our life. For
Uh-huh.
example, that everything is tidy or cleaned up or whatever it is. So those
Uh-huh.
things don't distract you, because I would say if if your apartment, for example, is not tidy, then it's just a distraction, generally speaking, in many cases. Um,
I'm the same. I'm the same. I just love having things organized and clean. And I don't know, I think it just helps you, especially if you tend to do things that are a little bit chaotic, and business often, or
mm,
pretty much inevitably, is chaotic. For me personally, having my life structured and just like the room, the office, my laptop, everything's really structured. And I think that
yeah,
gives me the necessary space and structure to then function and to juggle between many different things and so on.
yeah, I reckon that's true.
Interesting. What was I going to say? I did this crazy experiment a while ago, and I'm doing it now again. I talked about it on a podcast before, but it was in Slovenian, so this is the first time I'm talking about it in English then, where I became at some point I became quite obsessed about how I'm spending my time. I'm like, time is really, really valuable,
Mm.
and the most important thing that I can figure out in life is where my time is going. And so I started quite obsessing about what I'm actually doing, day to day, but not just day to day, but all the time during the day, right? So I started tracking all my time, and I started tracking what I was doing pretty much every single minute from morning until the time I went to bed. Um, First, I was doing it in a Google sheet. Now I started doing it in a Toggle. If you've maybe heard about it, it's like this time
Mm.
tracking tool. And man, the best thing I've ever done. It made me so much more aware of where my time is going. And it's kind of crazy. A lot of people would say like, "Dude, you're insane. Why would you want to do something like that?" But I really, really want to know where my time is going, And if is it going in things where I want it to go, right? Am I spending it on impactful things and on things that are meaningful to me or whatever? And I don't want to do that forever. And I don't, I'm not going to be doing for a long time. But I think maybe I just want to do it every month for a week or quarterly for a week, just to bring my attention back to where my time is going and how I'm spending it. So that's been very impactful for me and for my, I guess, um, just personal productivity, but not just that. Even making my time a little bit more fulfilling, right? Because I knew that my time was going to the right things.
Makes you feel less guilty about spending time on something casual like Netflix because you know how much you do of it, and that you
Yes,
spend time on something that's
exactly.
impactful.
It's
Um,
a very good point, because then I also started procrastinating in a more intentional way. I was like, you know what? I actually worked really hard for the last 4 hours. I can take a break now and like do something just to chill.
yeah, there was, I think it was a Kickstarter project at some point, like a time tracking device, similar. So I love my little fidget spinner. So every time I
Ah,
think I'm like one of those people who needs this actually all the time.
interesting.
But there was
That's
one
cool.
project where you had like one which had like different like it had like a dice with lots of sides, like kind of
Uh
like
huh.
a larger version of a dice. And depending on how you place it, now I'm working on email, so it make your time tracking really easy. So it had like an image on
Ah,
each of the sides,
yeah,
but it had
yeah,
like, I don't know, 24 sites. I don't remember. So you
yeah.
could track email, TV, and literally you just take this around with you and you just place it in different ways based
That's really
on.
cool.
And I was really close to buy it at the time. That's years and years ago when I started my career, but not that long ago. I think when I moved to London 6 years ago now. Um, I think then I wanted to buy this, but I think my easiest option was just don't be on the phone. The phone drains it all. The phone is like,
Mm,
I think I got once this notification that it said, oh, your average last week was 4 hours or something. And I was like, I'm out of here.
wild,
Deinstalled it
right? You're
all.
like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's gone. It's lots of business. So most hours is on like email, LinkedIn, news. At the time, I gamed one game, TFT. It's called kind of like a tactical chess. I
Uh-huh.
really liked it, but I was like, that's just way too much time on any of that. Um,
Yeah,
Obviously, if it's fun, go for it. But for me, I realize it's not active fun. It's just killing time in those time pockets, and you can use it at so much nicer things. For example, going to the park today rather than watching Netflix for hours or play a
yeah,
game.
yeah. Nice. Do you have any other um thing or perhaps unusual thing about how you work? So you mentioned a few things now that are kind of interesting. Like you have your late mornings. I'm the same, by the way. I never start working before 10 a.m. and I love working after 10 p.m. That's like I'm just in the zone at that
Yeah,
hour of the day. And I can go on until 2 a.m., 3 a.m., full of energy if I have something engaging to work on. So that you just talked about your fidget spinner, which is kind of an interesting thing as well. Is there anything else that you have that's kind of unusual, or not necessarily unusual, but just something that's your thing that makes you productive or effective, or it's kind of a key part of how you work in your routine? You're using a standing desk, I think, aren't you?
yeah.
Yeah.
Rather recently, I realized they're cheaper than my normal desk. This was
Ah.
like 200 quid or something like that. So I was like, what?
Uh huh.
It works quite nice actually, going up and down. It's all electronic, almost like 200
Uh-huh.
quid. So I was like, go for it if you work a lot from home. I think it actually helps. This is a rather long meeting or call, so at some point I have to sit
I
down again.
love I love
But
standing during meetings.
yeah, it keeps you on the wall essentially. You don't, your mind doesn't go
Yeah.
wandering. Same for me with the fidget spinner. Um, I really, really try to not do anything during meetings on the side. It is very hard, and I had like one or two employees mentioning it. They're like, "Hey, sometimes it feels like," and that was in-person meetings actually,
Uh-huh.
because you look at your phone, and I was like, "Oh
Uh-huh.
yeah." That one when I also started disabling notifications because I realized every time it vibrates, I look at it and it just takes me out of whatever I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
So no notifications, I think, was the most impactful thing in my life. I'm missing a lot of calls because of this. I think I have to change my setting there. But at the moment, I'm glad I miss all the calls because it's literally just. I think my girlfriend's coming home, so I have to close this door. Um, but where was I? Ah, right. So essentially, like trying to not get distracted, for example, when someone comes home or something. But
Yeah.
notifications are the same, they kind of take you out, right? So calls at the moment I get from moving offices. So I get 10 calls a day at a minimum from wild agents who want to show me any random office that's out there,
Uh-huh.
which is really interesting the first two calls, but then it's all the same. They're going to show you there are 20 agents on the same property, more or less, within London. It's a crazy market. Um, Besides that, I think what I really like to do is, as I say, have those pockets of time. Um, and I know lots of people have this quite hard. It's like focusing on what's actually a priority. And I think that's why it makes it quite easy for me to actually relax and have use a pocket of time because I know I've done the important things. So I'm quite conscious that if I don't do this now, I have to do it later. If it's something I have to
Mm-hmm.
do, uh, it was like at some point I just realized, right, no, procrastinating, no, how was it called in English?
Procrastinating.
That word is something everybody does, and
Mm.
I think I just got very good at not doing this. Um, and to actually do that, I use the reminder list a lot on the phone, also an Apple kind of feature. That reminder list, I think I checked once. I have by now, I think it's 4,000 last time, and I checked a year ago, 4,000 reminders. So,
Reminders.
yeah. So, where you set a specific time to do something.
Yes.
So, I'm very, very actively thinking often about ideas, what we should do as a business, but I don't want to write them down. I don't want to work in the moment on them. I don't want to get distracted from what's actually right now
Uh-huh.
important. So I schedule them for a month's time, sometimes in 6 months' time.
Uh-huh.
Or I have reminders. I say, right, that's important. Do it tomorrow in the evening. Do this in this 10 to 12, like midnight kind of pocket of time. But I schedule reminders quite frequently because I don't want to get distracted of what I'm working right now. So I think rather than being, as you say, like structure your day, I don't do that as much. I'm just trying to not get distracted and do the important things first and then
Mm-hmm.
work on the other things. So you would say, or if I know, for example, Amazon, I hate Amazon as a platform. It's so cumbersome to work within the platform. And I know if I do it in the office, I have this massive, massive Google sheet I need for the import. If I get distracted just by someone talking to me, I totally forget where I was in this sheet because it's
Mm-hmm.
so massive.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to do it in the evenings because it's
Mm-hmm.
boring and I need to be focused. But that's
Mm-hmm.
actually super interesting for me to get into this spot or develop this consciousness of what wastes your time and how you especially focus on the right things essentially. Um, don't think I've mastered that yet, but getting to a stage where you are happy with exactly what you focus on, I think just allows you to do everything else. You go home, you go for a beer in a pub, and you don't feel guilty because you're like, the important things are done.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is extra. And that can wait.
Mm-hmm. So with the reminders, I'm just trying to understand how exactly you do that because I tend to put stuff in my calendar if there's something I need to think through something, or I don't know, prepare something, I sometimes just book a slot in my own calendar. I'm like, okay, during this time I'm going to be focused on that. But you use reminders like you come up with an idea, or there's a task and you set a reminder for like next week and say, next week I'm going to work on that, or how do you do it?
Yeah. So essentially, I have at any given time a lot of reminders. So essentially, let me just see. So currently, I have a reminder actually for today. So that's a bad example, but I have quite a few reminders if you open this up.
Uh-huh.
So I have to work on a lot at the moment. So it's like 10 reminders open. But it's like stuff like get a new HSBC card because I realized last purchase that my HSBC card for the business is running out really soon, or
Uh-huh.
not running out, how do you say? Like in June,
Expiring
it's
or?
not expiring. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I put that on instead of doing that because you have to log in. So I put actually a reminder,
Mm-hmm.
which was for earlier today, but I was in the park. But
Mm-hmm.
essentially focusing on everything that is not important, just put it in, or if it's important, an idea, but you know it's not important right now, put it into a reminder and then schedule it for the future. I tried the calendar. The problem with the calendar is you can't just postpone it. So here with the reminder
Mm-hmm.
app, you can just say, remind me next week, remind me tomorrow, remind me in three
Mm-hmm.
hours.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I do really frequently. Because in most cases, I don't know what I'm doing next week at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So if a reminder pops up, often I just say, remind me tomorrow morning. And then in the morning, normally on the way to the work, I organize my reminders again. So I'm like, right, I believe all of those
Uh-huh.
things I'm doing actually in the next days. It didn't work with meetings. I tried that really early on. That was before I used Gmail, so I haven't used it now in Gmail. That was like Outlook. That was like 10 plus years
Mm-hmm.
ago where I tried to do that. So it didn't work for me at all to do it in the calendar. But as soon as the reminder came out, like the reminder app from Apple came out, I started using it. And as I said, I think 4.5, 5,000 solved reminders I easily have since then. So it's everything from my private life to work, anything I put in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I and that's one of the things I think makes it really easy for me. You don't feel guilty. You don't feel like, oh, I forgot something, because there's no possible way I forget anything, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. And I had this feeling often. I'm like, ah, you can't watch Netflix because there is something important, but you don't remember exactly what. But having the
Mm-hmm.
reminders, it's always in front of you, essentially. So I use it more like semi-task list reminder hybrid, essentially.
Do you have a task list as well? So you also keep a, like a list of, I don't know. No. Okay, so your reminders are essentially your to-do list.
Yeah, more or less. Anything
Got it.
that needs to be done that is so important, I do immediately, or
Mm-hmm.
otherwise it goes into reminder and say 3, 4 hours from now, and then I deal with it. Uh, so it becomes a hybrid between
Interesting.
those two. Really helped me, I would say,
Interesting.
but
Yeah.
not everybody is like that. That's what I said earlier. It's my German kind of attitude, I think, having everything kind of scheduled. But I think, especially as a founder, this, as you said, like the pressure of having long days, working more than everybody else, I think this helps with it really. I Instead of really structuring your day, if that's not your how you are, that works for many people. But if you don't can't structure your day that detailed and stick to it, be that diligent, try the reminders. It just for me, I was young when I started it, but it was a game changer. It was quite easy to adjust
Mm-hmm.
because I just stepped into my career and I used it more or less instantly. So adjusting to it might be hard, but if you give it a few weeks to use reminders effectively, I think it's a big game changer. And now everything has reminders. Gmail has,
Yeah.
you can snooze something, you can do reminders in Slack. But if you use this effectively, so Slack for me is also no notifications. So I often come to
Mm.
messages much later when someone asks me something, and then I put a reminder. I'm like, right, answering this would take me 20 minutes. I don't have 20 minutes, so I make a 4 hour reminder on top of that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
getting into the habit of focusing on the important thing by putting reminders on the non as important things essentially.
I see. Okay, that's interesting. See, that's something that I've never heard before of this kind of approach, but I can see how it makes sense. I tend to just have a, to-do list, and then I try to highlight the three most important things for every single day. I'm like, okay, if I get these three things done, then the day was a successful day. What tends to happen is the list ends up being much more than just three things. It's just way more, and then it's quite hard to stick to just those three important ones because something urgent comes in, and then you need to be like, well, is it urgent? It's urgent, but is it as important? Is kind of the decision between those things, what to actually focus on. But yeah, I tend to just end up having a long list of things that I then prioritize throughout the day. Reminders, I use them just for like recurring things. I probably use like 3 or 4 reminders, like schedule groceries delivery, because I have to do that every single week, or something I need to do on a monthly basis, right? For those kind of things. But yeah, I can see how that declutters your to-do list a little bit, because you have a long list of things, but you just schedule them for a week from now or a month from now, and you
Exactly.
don't really need to think about it. You don't need to see it anywhere until the time comes.
Like, until it becomes important, essentially.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's
yeah,
exactly where it comes from, right? Otherwise, to-do list never shrinks. But I have days where
yeah.
reminder list is 0, and I'm like, well, I can do whatever I want now because
I
my
can go to
to-do
a park
list,
today.
exactly. Also doing work days, I meant more, but doing work
I
days,
know,
I'm
I
like,
know. Yeah.
I can focus on other projects, like, well, a bit of ideation or strategizing a bit more because I know nothing else is important in this moment in time. Everything has the importance in a different moment. I think that helped me a lot.
Hmm. Cool. Okay. I love geeking out on this kind of topic, like just the tactics of how to make your day productive and how to,
Product managing
perform and
you.
be on top of things. Yeah, exactly. I suppose so. So I love to talk about those kind of subjects. I think we can start to wrap up, before we finish, just so we don't forget, two truths, one lie. So, which one was the lie?
You said someone had a heart attack on an
Yeah.
airplane next to me was a lie. It's actually very true. It was on a
Oh
flight from
shit.
Australia to Dubai,
Oh
I think.
no.
And I swear I had never to go to the restroom as much as there because you're not asking that guy to stand up
Yeah.
or you're not climbing
Yeah.
over him. He made it, and we were in the biggest airplane that is, I think it's like the Airbus 360 or 380 or something. So it couldn't even
Yeah.
land in lots of airports. So it had to land in certain airports essentially.
Oh
So
man.
they wanted
Yeah.
to land it, but they were like, well, we can't land it anywhere. The next airport that can accommodate this airplane is in Dubai. Um, Long story short, that's true. The other ones, one of them is actually just an extended version because it's quite hard to tell a lie. So all of them are true in some extent. So yes,
Yeah.
I hired someone who stole a lot of goods from a company. My bad. Maybe not my bad, but bad judgment.
Well.
And we have one, and Harvey hates me for it because I bring it up all the time. I think it's really funny. So the lie is, instead of sending 2 vans to my house full of stock, we accidentally sent once a van full of stock to my house. Uh, so it was a little lie, but all of them in the essence are true.
Uh-huh. I actually, I think I've heard that before. So but I obviously didn't remember if it was one van or two vans. So I was like, yeah, I think I remember that from before. That must be true.
I think at the time when we met, yeah, just when you moved here. When did you move here? Like 3 years now, or
That
two
was
and a
four
half?
years ago, almost 4 years ago, 3.5.
Right. So, yeah, I think at the time that just roughly at that time it happened, I reckon.
So we probably talked
It's a
about it.
fun
Yeah.
story. We survived. It was the day my girlfriend moved in with me, so double trouble. So we had all
Perfect.
her stuff, and the van with all the goods arrived. It was an honest mistake. I don't even think it was a mistake on his side. But the courier just sent an invoice with the wrong. They mixed up the dates, and obviously you don't check on every invoice, not dates,
Hmm.
the addresses. But yeah, lots of fun of those small stories when you have physical goods. They look completely different than
Uh-huh.
when you have a tech company, I guess, your stories.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. All right. Awesome. So we revealed the truth and the lie. And Moritz, thank you so much. It was a really fun conversation.
My pleasure.
Um, and yeah, we'll stay in touch. I'm really curious how your story continues. And well, good luck with Noah, obviously.
Yeah, thank you. Really, really enjoyed it. First podcast, but has been, yeah, enjoyable ride.
You've been doing well. I mean, you should go to more of this. I think it was great.
I'm a bit of an antisocial person in most cases, so it takes me always quite a big leap. I can talk, but I don't enjoy it.
This is like uh, an easy way to mm, be social by just having a one-on-one conversation, but then it kind of, you scale that to an audience of listeners. So maybe it kind of works for me. I'm not the most social person. I'm more of an introvert, but I love having one-on-one conversations. So this is a way to have one-on-ones, but uh, at the same time, you kind of reach more people as well. So for me personally, it works. It's a win-win.
Well, maybe give it a try. I really enjoyed it, I have to say.
Nice.
Right.
All right.
Um,
Thanks.
Thank you very much.